Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to continue a series that started on the Anchor podcast app site. Is now Spotify for podcasters. Just continue to read through the Chronicles of Narnia franchise. The book we started and I'm going to continue reading today is Prince Caspian. If you guys want to listen to the Horse and the Boy podcast episodes here on Spotify for podcasters, the first 3 episodes of Reading Prince Caspian are on there as well. If you're out there reading books, listening to music, talking about wrestling, uh, computer games, then hit the subscribe button because I try to post more consistently here than I do on Anchor / Spotify for podcasters. Also, if you can leave a like on this video, it would be very much appreciated. And if you want to know more about when things are coming out on the channel, you can go to Twitter, where the username is the same as the YouTube channel name, except I had to remove S from Tunes, so it's just Russell Reed Tune, type as the username. And on Instagram has the same thing, Russell Reed Tunes. But if you want to follow it, you can. If you don't, that's fine too. And that's all I got to say about that. Wrestling fans will know that line, but non-wrestling fans won't know. Comes from Stone Cold Steve Austin. I went to reading the book. Chapter 7. Old Narnia in Danger. The place where they had met the Fawns was of course Dancing Line itself. And near Caspian and his friends, the names of a night of the Great Council. To sleep under the stars, to drink nothing but warm water, and to live chiefly on nuts and wild fruit was a strange experience for Caspian. After his bed with silken sheets and a tapestried chamber at the castle, with meals laid out in gold and silver dishes in the interim, and attendants ready at his call. But he had never enjoyed himself more, never had sleep been more refreshing, no food tasted more savory, and he began already to harden, and his face wore a kingly, leer look. And the great night king and his various strange subjects came stealing into the lawn by ones and twos and threes, or by sixes and sevens, illumined and shining almost at her full. His heart swelled as he saw their numbers and heard their greetings, all whom he had met within, bulgy bears and red dwarfs and black dwarfs, moles and badgers, hares and hedgehogs, and others whom he had not yet seen, 5 satyrs as red as foxes, the whole contingent of talking mice, one to the teeth, and flying a shrill trumpet, some owls, the old raven of raven spawn. Last of all, it was still Caspian's breath away, but the centaurs came a small but genuine giant, rainbow raven of Dead Man's Hill, carrying on his back a basket full of rather seasick balloons who had accepted his offering of a lift and were now wishing they had walked instead. The bulgy bears were very anxious to have the feast first and leave the council till afterwards, perhaps till tomorrow. Chief and his mice said that councils and feast could both wait, and proposed storming Nero's in his own castle that very night. Twig and the other squirrels said they could talk and eat at the same time, so why not have the council and feast all at once? The moles proposed throwing up entrenchments along the lawn before they did anything else. The fawns thought it would be better to begin with a solemn dance. The old raven, while agreeing with the bears that it would take too long to have a full council before supper, begged to be allowed to give a brief address to the whole company. The Caspian and the centaurs and the dwarfs overruled all these suggestions and insisted on holding a real council of war at once. When all the other creatures had been persuaded to sit down quietly in a great circle, and when, with more difficulty, they had got Twig to stop running to and fro and saying, "Silence, silence, everyone for the king's speech," Caspian, feeling a little nervous, got up. "Romans," he began, but he never got any further, for at that very moment Camilla the hare said, "Hush, there's a man somewhere near." They were all creatures of the wild, accustomed to being hunted, and they all became still as statues. The beasts all turned their noses in the direction which Camilla had indicated. "Smells like man, and yet not quite like man," whispered Truffle Hunter. It's getting steadily nearer, said Kamala. Two badgers and you three dwarfs, with your bows at the ready. Go softly off to meet it, said Caspian. We'll settle on, said a black dwarf, grimly, fitting a shaft to his bowstring. Don't shoot it. Don't shoot if it is alone, said Caspian. Catch it. Why? Asked the dwarf. Do as you're told, said Grindstone the centaur. Everyone waited in silence while three dwarfs and two badgers trotted stealthily across to the trees on the northwest side of the land. Then came a sharp, breathless cry. Stop! Who goes there? And a sudden sprint. A moment later, a voice, which Caspian knew well, could he heard saying, all right, I'm unarmed. Take my wrist if you like, worthy badgers, but don't bite right through them. I want to speak to the king. Dr. Cornelius, cried Caspian with joy, and rushed forward to greet his old tutor. Everyone else crowded round. Ah, said Mr. Brick, a renegade dwarf, a half and halfer. Shall I pass my sword through its door? Be quiet, Mr. Brick, said Trumpkin. The creature can't help its ancestry. This is my greatest friend, and the savior of my life, said Caspian. If anyone doesn't like this company may leave my army at once. Dearest doctor, I am glad to see you again. However did you find us out? By a little use of simple magic, your majesty, said the doctor, who was still puffing and blowing from having walked so fast. But there is no time to go into that now. We must all fly from this place at once. You are already betrayed, and Miraz is on the move. Before midday tomorrow, you will be surrounded. Betrayed, said Caspian, and by whom? Another renegade dwarf, no doubt, said Metabrook. By your horse, the steward, said Dr. Cornelius. The poor brute knew no better. When they knocked off, of course, he went bobbing back to his stable in the castle. Then the secret of your flight was known. I made myself scarce, having no wish to be questioned about it and realizes torture children. I had a pretty good guess from my crystal as to where I should find you. All day, that was the day before yesterday, I saw Miraz's tracking parties out in the woods. Yesterday I learned that his army is out. I don't think some of your pure-blooded dwarfs have as much woodcraft as might be expected. You've left tracks all over the place. Great carelessness. At any rate, something has ruined Miraz that Narnia is not so dead as he had hoped, and he is on the move. Hurrah, said a very shrill but small voice from somewhere at the doctor's feet. Let them come. All I ask is that the king will put me and my people in the front. Why, said Dr. Cornelius, has your majesty got grasshoppers or mosquitoes in your army? But after stooping down and peering carefully through the spectacles, he broke into a laugh. By the lion, he swore, it's a mouse, Senor Mouse. I desire your better acquaintance. I am honored by meeting so valiant a beast. My friendship you shall have, learned man, piped Reepicheep, and any dwarf or giant in the army who does not give you good language shall have my sword to reckon with. Is there time for this foolery? Asked Lickerbeck. What are your plans, battle or flight? Battle if need be, said Shrunken. We are hardly ready for it yet, and this is no very defensible place. I don't like the idea of running away, said Caspian. Hear him, said the Mangy Bears. Whatever we do, don't let's have any running, especially not before supper, and not too soon after it either. Those who run first do not always run last, said the centaur. And why should we let the enemy choose our position instead of choosing it ourselves? Let us find a strong place. That's wise, your majesty, said Truffle Hunter. But where are we to go? Asked several voices. Your majesty, said Dr. Cornelius, and all you variety of creatures. I think we must fly east and down the river to the great woods. The Chaldeans hated that region. They have always been afraid of the sea and of something that may come over the sea. That is why they have let the great winds blow up. The traditions speak true. The ancient Caribbean was at the river mouth. All that part is friendly to us and hateful to our enemies. We must go to Aslan's house. Aslan's house, said several voices. We do not know what it is. It lies within the skirts of the great woods, and it is a huge mound which Narnia raised in very ancient times, over a very magical place where there stood, and perhaps still stands, a very magical stone. The mound is all hollowed out within into galleries and caves, and the stone is in the central king of all. There is room in the mound for all our stairs, and those of us who have most need of cover and are most accustomed to underground life can be lodged in the caves. The rest of us can lie in the wood, at a push all of us, except this worthy giant, take retreat into the mountain itself, and then it should be beyond the reach of every danger, except famine. It was a deep thing we have learned among us, said Trepidation, that something muttered under his breath. Something suddenly. I wish our leaders would think less about these old wives' tales and more about victuals and arms. They approved of Cornelius' proposal, and then they know half an hour later, they were on the march. Before sunrise, they arrived at Aslan's tower. It's certainly an awesome place, a long green hill on top of another hill, long since grown over the trees, and one little red breezeway leading into it. The tunnels inside are perfect ways till you got to know them, and they were lined and roofed with seared stones, and on the stones glittering in the twilight, Caspian saw strange characters and snaky patterns, and pictures in which the frame of a lion is repeated again and again. It all seemed to belong to even older Narnia, and the Narnia of which his nurse had told him. It was after they had taken up their quarters in and around the house that fortune began to turn against them. King realized the scouts soon found their new land, and he and his army arrived on the edge of the woods, and as so often happens, the enemy turned out stronger than they had reckoned. Caspian's heart sank as he saw company after company arriving, and though Mirai's men had been afraid of going into the wood, they were even more afraid of Mirais, and with him in command they carried battle deeply into it, and sometimes almost to the hour itself. Caspian and other captains, of course, made many sorties into the open country. Thus, there was fighting on most days, and sometimes by night as well. The Caspian's party had on the hill the worst of it. Alas, there came a night when everything had gone as badly as possible, and the rain which had been falling heavily all day had ceased at nightfall, only to give only to give place to a raw cold. That morning Caspian had arranged what was his biggest battle yet, and all had hung their hopes on it. He, with most of the dwarfs, was to have fallen on the king's right wing at daybreak, and then when they were heavily engaged, giant Winter the centaurs and some of the fiercest beasts, was to have broken out from another place and endeavored to cut the king's right off from the rest of the army, and without all failed. No one had warned Caspian because no one in these later days of Narnia remembered that giants are not at all clever. Remember whether as big as a lion was a true giant in that respect. He had broken out at the wrong time and from the wrong place, and both his party and Caspian's had suffered badly, and done the enemy little harm. The rest of the dwarfs had been hurt, a centaur terribly wounded, and there were few in Caspian's party who had not lost blood. There was a gloomy company that huddled under the dripping trees to eat their scanty supper. The gloomiest of all was giant Wonderweather. He knew it was on his back. He sat in silence, shedding big tears, sweat on the end of his nose, and saw that the huge spot on the whole rock, the mice, was just beginning to get red and drowsy. They all jumped up, shaking the water out of their ears, and as the giant, and as the crew just began to get red and drowsy, they all jumped up, shaking the water out of their ears and raining their own blankets. Yes, honey, and as the giant and shrill with forcible voices, whether he thought they weren't well enough about this sort of thing. And when other people woke up and told the mice they had been enrolled as scouts and not as a concert party, and that's why they couldn't keep quiet. And Wonderweather tiptoed away to find some place where he could be miserable in peace and step on somebody's tail. And somebody, they said afterwards, it was a fox. And so everyone was out of temper. But in a secret and magical chamber at the heart of the house, King Caspian and Cornelius and the Badger and Lickabrick and Shrunken led council. Thick pillars of ancient workmanship supported the roof. In the center was the stone itself, a stone table, split right down the center and covered with what had once been writing of some kind. Ages of wind and rain and snow almost ran them away in old times, when the stone table had stood on the hilltop and the mound had not yet been built above it. They were not using the table nor sitting round it. It was too magic a thing for any common use. They sat on logs a little away from it. Between them was a rough wooden table, on which stood a really stray lamp, lighting up their pale faces and throwing big shadows on the rails. If your majesty is ever to use the horn, said Truffle Hunter, I think the time has now come. Caspian had of course told him of his treasure several days ago. We are certainly in great need, answered Caspian. It is hard to be sure we are at our greatest. Supposing there came an even worse need, and we had already used it. By that argument, said Nickelbrick, your majesty will never use it until it is too late. I agree with that, said Dr. Cornelius. And what do you think, Shumkin? Asked Caspian. Oh, as for me, said the Red Dwarf, but been listening with complete indifference, your majesty knows I think the horn and that bit of broken stone over there, and the great King Peter, and the lion Aslan are all eggs and moonshine. It's all one to me when your majesty blows the horn. All I insist on is that the army is told nothing about it. There's no good raising hopes of magical help, which as I think are sure to be disappointed. Then in the name of Aslan we will wind Queen Susan's horn, said Caspian. There is one thing, sire, said Dr. Cornelius, that should perhaps be done first. We do not know what form the help will take. It might call Aslan himself from oversea, but I think it is more likely to call Peter, the High King, and his mighty consorts down from the high past. In either case, I do not think we can be sure that the help will come to this very spot. You never said a truer word, put in Shrimpton. I think one on the line man, that they or he will come back to one or other of the ancient places of Narnia. This, what we now say, is the most ancient and most deeply magical of all. And here I think the answer is likeliest to come. But there are two others. One, Lantern Waste, upriver, west of Beaver's Den, where the royal children first appeared in Narnia, as the records tell the river is down at the river now, where the castle Pierpont Wall once stood. And if Aslan himself comes, that would be the best place for meeting him too. For every story says that he is the son of the great emperor over the sea, and over the sea he will pass. I should like very much to send messengers to both places, to Lantern Waste and the river mouth, to receive them, or him, or it. Just as I thought, muttered Trunken. The first result of our foolery is not to bring us help, but to lose us two fighters. Who did you think of sending, Dr. Cornelius? Asked Caspian. Squirrels are best for getting through enemy country without being caught, said Shovel Hunter. All squirrels, and we haven't many, said Nickelback. I'm rather flighty. Anyone I trust on a job like that would be Powder Twig. Let it be Powder Twig then, said King Caspian. And who for our other messenger? I know you'd go, Shuffle Hunter, but you haven't the speed. Nor you, Dr. Cornelius. I won't go, said Nickelback. With all these humans and beasts about, there must be a dwarf here to see that the dwarfs are fairly treated. Thunders and thunderstorms, cried Trumpkin in a rage. Is that how you speak to the king? Send him, sire. I'll go. But I thought you didn't believe in the horn, Trumpkin, said Caspian. No more than I do, your majesty. But what's that got to do with it? I might as well die on a wild goose chase as die here. You are my king. I know the difference between giving advice and taking orders. You've had my advice, and now it's the time for orders. I will never forget this, Drunken, said Caspian. Send for Paddington, one of you, and when shall I blow the horn? I would wait for sunrise, your majesty, said Dr. Cornelius. That sometimes has an effect on operations of white magic. A few minutes later, Paddington arrived, and had his task explained to him, as he was, like many squirrels, full of courage and dash and energy and excitement and mischief. Not to say conceit, he no sooner heard it than he was eager to be off. It was arranged that he should rent for Lantern Waste, while Chunkin made the shorter journey to the river mouth. For a hasty meal, they both set off with the fervent thanks and good wishes of the king, Badger, and Cornelius. Chapter 8. How they left the island. And so, said Chunkin, for as you have realized, it was he who had been telling Amber's story to the four children, sitting on the grass in the ruined hall of Caspian. And so I put a crest or two in my pocket, left behind all weapons but my dagger, and took to the woods in the gray of the morning. I'd been plodding away for many hours when there came a sound I had never heard the like of in my born days. And I won't forget that. The whole air was full of it, loud as thunder, but far longer, clear and sweet as music over water, strong enough to shake the woods. And I said to myself, that's not the horn, call me a rabbit. And a moment later I wondered why he hadn't blown it sooner. What time was it? Asked Edmund. Between 9 and 10 of the clock, said Trunkin. Just when we were at the railway station, said all the children, and looked at one another with shining eyes. Please go on, said Lucy to the dwarf. But as I was saying, I wondered, and I went on as hard as I could, belt. I kept on all night, and then when it was half light this morning, as I'd no more sense than a giant, I risked a short cut across open country to cut off a big loop of the river and was caught, not by the army, but by a pompous old fool that was charging the little castle, which is Miraz's last stronghold towards the coast. I will tell you, they got no true tale out of me. I was a dwarf, and that was enough. Lobsters and lollipops. It is a good thing the seneschal was a pompous fool. Anyone else would have run through it there and then. But nothing would do for him short of a grand execution, sending me down to the ghost in the full ceremonial way. And then this young lady, he nodded at Susan, was her bit of archery, and it was pretty shooting, let me tell you. And here we are. And I found my armor, for of course they took that. He knocked out and refilled his pipe. Great Scott, said Peter. So it was the man. Your own man, Sue. They dragged us all off that seat on the platform yesterday morning. I can hardly believe it, yet it all fits in. I don't know why you shouldn't believe it, said Lucy. If you believe in magic at all, aren't there lots of stories about magic forcing people out of one place, out of one world, into another? I mean, when a magician in the Arabian Nights calls up a jinn, it has to come. We had to come, just like that. Yes, said Peter. I suppose what makes it feel so queer is that in the stories it's always someone in our world who does the calling. One doesn't really think about where the jin's coming from. And now we know what it feels like for the jinn, said Evelyn, with a chuckle. Golly, it's a bit uncomfortable to know that we can be whistled for like that. It's worse than my father says about living at the mercy of the telephone. But we want to be here, don't we, said Lucy, if Aslan wants us? Meanwhile, said the dwarf, what are we to do? I suppose I'd better go back to King Caspian and tell him no help has come. No help, said Susan. But it has worked, and here we are. Yes, to be sure, I see that, said the dwarf, whose pipe, whose pipe, cleaned, and whose pipe cleaned, whose pipe was cleaned, and, and given to the dwarf. Um, so, yeah, said the dwarf, whose pipe seemed to be blocked. At any rate, he made himself very busy cleaning it. Well, I mean, don't you yet see who we are? Shouted Lucy. You are stupid. I suppose you are the four children of the old stories, said Trumpkin, and I am very glad to meet you, of course. And it's very interesting, no doubt, but no offense, and he hesitated again. You get on and say whatever you're going to say. Uh, well then, no offense, said Trumpkin, but you know, the king and Truffle Hunter and Dr. Cornelius were expecting, well, if you see what I mean, help. To put it in another way, I think they've been imagining you as great warriors, as it is. We're offering fond of children and all that, but just at the moment, in the middle of the room, I'm sure you understand. You mean you think we're no good, said Edmund, getting red in the face. Now pray, don't be offended, interrupted the dwarf. I assure you, my dear little friends, little from you is really a bit too much, said Edmund, jumping up. I suppose you don't believe we won the Battle of Narnia. Well, you can say what you like about me, because I know. There's no good losing our temper, said Peter. Let's fit him out with fresh armor and fit ourselves out from the treasure chamber and have a talk after that. I don't quite see the point, began Edmund, but Lucy whispered in his ear. Hadn't we better do what Peter says? He is the High King, you know, and I think he has an idea. So Edmund agreed, and by the end of his twitch, they all, including Trenton, went down the steps again into the dark coldness and dusty splendor of the treasure house. The dwarf's eyes glistened as he saw the wealth that lay on the shelves, but he had to stand on tiptoes to do so, and he muttered to himself, it would never do to let Nickelbrick see this. Never. They found easily enough a mail shirt for him, a sword, a helmet, a shield, a bow, and quiver full of arrows, all of dwarfish size. The helmet was of copper, set with rubies, and there was gold on the hilt of the sword. Trumpkin had never seen, much less carried, so much wealth in all his life. The children also put on mail shirts and helmets. A sword and shield were found for Edmund, and a bag for Lucy. Peter and Susan were, of course, already carrying their gifts as they came back up the stairway, jingling in their mail, and already looking and feeling more like lions and less like school children. The two boys were behind, apparently making some plan. Lucy heard Edmund say, no, let me do it. It'll be more of a sucks for him if I win, and less of a letdown for us. If I fail. All right, Ed, said Peter. When they came out into the daylight, Edmund turned to the dwarf very politely and said, I've got something to ask you. Kids like us don't often have the chance of meeting a great warrior like you. Would you ever know fencing match with me? It would be frightfully decent. Lad, said Trumpkin, these swords are sharp. I know, said Edmund, but I'll never get anywhere near you, and you'll be quite clever enough to disarm me without doing me any damage. It's a dangerous game, said Trumpkin, but since you make such a point of it, I'll try a pass or two. Both swords went out in a moment, and the three others jumped off the dais and stood watching. It was well worth it. It was not like the silly fighting you see with broadswords on the stage. It was not even like the rapier fighting, which you sometimes see rather done. This was actual broadsword fighting. The great thing is to slash at your enemy's legs and feet, because they have the part that have no armor. And when he slashes at yours, you jump with both feet off the ground, so that his blow goes under them. This gave the dwarf an advantage, because Edmund being much taller had to be always stooping. I don't think Edmund would have had a chance if he had fought Trumpkin 24 hours earlier. Narnia had been working upon him ever since he arrived on the island, and all his old battles came back to him, and his arms and fingers remembered their old strength. He was King Edmund once more. Round and round the two combatants circled, stroke after stroke they gave, and Susan, who could never learn to like this sort of thing, shouted out, "Oh, do be careful!" And then, so quickly that no one, unless they knew as Peter did, could quite see how it happened. Edmund flashed his sword down with a peculiar twist. The dwarf's sword flew out of his grip, and Trumpkin was rending his empty hand as he drew up to a stand from the I see the point, said Trumpkin, dryly. You know a trick I never learned. That's quite true, put in Peter. The best swordsman in the world may be disarmed by a trick that's new to him. I think it's only fair to give Trumpkin a chance at something else. Will you have a shooting match with my sister? There are no tricks in archery, you know. Oh, you're jokers you are, said the dwarf. I begin to see, as if I didn't know how she can shoot, after what happened this morning. All the same, I'll have a try. He spoke gruffly, with his eyes brightened. If he was a famous bowman among his own people. All five of them came out into the courtyard. What's to be the target? Asked Peter. I think that apple hanging over the wall in the branch there. You, said Susan. That would do nicely, lass, said Trumpkin. You mean the yellow one near the middle of the bunch? No, not that, said Susan. The red one, above, over the battlement. The dwarf's face fell. It's more like a cherry than an apple, he muttered. He said nothing out loud. They tossed up their first shot, greatly to the interest of Trumpkin, who had never seen a coin tossed before, and Susan lost. It was to shoot from the top of the steps that led from the hall into the courtyard. Everyone could see the way the dwarf took his position, and handled his bow, that he knew what he was about. Trying went the string. It was an excellent shot. The tiny apple shook as the arrow passed, and a leaf came fluttering down. Then Susan went to the top of the steps and strung her bow. She was not enjoying her match half so much as Edmund had enjoyed his. Not because she had any doubt about hitting the apple, but because Susan was so tender-hearted that she almost hated to beat someone who had been beaten already. The dwarf watched her keenly as she drew the shaft to her ear. A moment later, with a little soft thump, which they could all hear in that quiet place, the apple fell to the grass with Susan's arrow in it. Well done, Sue, shouted the other children. It wasn't really any better than yours, said Susan to the dwarf. I thought there was a tiny breath of wind as you shot. No, there wasn't, said Trumpkin. Don't tell me. I know that I'm fairly beaten. I won't even say that the scar of my last wound catches me a bit when I get my arm well back. Oh, are you wounded? Asked Lucy. Do let me look. It's not a sight for little girls, began Trumpkin. Then he suddenly checked himself. There I go talking like a fool again, he said. I suppose you're as likely to be a great surgeon as your brother is to be a great swordsman, or your sister to be a great archer. He sat down on the steps and took off his pauldrons and slipped on his low shirt, showing an arm hairy and muscular in proportion as a sailor's, though not much bigger than a child's. There was a flimsy bandage on the shoulder, which Lucy proceeded to unroll. Underneath, the cut looked very nasty, and there was a good deal of swelling. Oh, poor Trumpkin, said Lucy. How horrid. Then she carefully dripped onto it one single drop of the cordial in her flask. Hello, eh? What have you done? Said Trumpkin, and however he turned his head and squinted, and whisked his beard to and fro. He couldn't quite see his own shoulder. Then he felt her as well as he could, getting his arms and fingers into very difficult positions as you do when you're trying to scratch a place that is just out of reach. Then he swung his arm and raised it and tried the muscles and finally jumped to his feet crying, Giants and junipers, it's true. It's as good as new. After that he burst into a great laugh and said, well, I made as big a fool of myself as ever a dwarf did. No offense, I hope. My humble duty to your majesties, humble duty. And thanks for my life, my food, my breakfast, and my lesson. The children all said it was quite all right, and not to mention it. And now, said Peter, if you really decided to believe in us, I have, said the dwarf. It's quite clear what we have to do. You must join King Caspian at once. The sooner, the better, said Trumpkin. My being such a fool has already wasted about an hour. It's about 2 days' journey the way you came, said Peter. For us, I mean. You can't walk all day and night like you dwarfs. Then he turned to the others. What Trumpkin calls Aslan's How is obviously the stone table itself. You remember it was about a half a day's march, a little less, from there down to the fords of Marina. Marina's Bridge, we call it, said Trumpkin. There was no bridge in our time, said Peter, and then from Marina down to here was another day and a bit. We used to get home about tea time on the second day, going easily. Knowing how we could do the whole thing in a day and a half, perhaps. But remember, it's all woods now, said Trumpkin, and there are enemies to dodge. Look here, said Edmund. Believe you go by the same way that our dear little friend came. No more of that, your majesty, if you love me. said the dwarf. Very well, said Edmund. May I say our DLF? Edmund, said Susan. Don't keep on having like that. That's all right, lass. I mean, your majesty, said Trumpkin with a chuckle. The Jib went raise a blister, and after that, they often called him the DLF till they almost forgotten what it meant. As I was saying, continued Edward, we didn't go that way. Why shouldn't we row south till we come to Glasswater Creek and row up it? That brings us up behind the hill with the stone table, and we'll be safe while we're at sea. If we start at once, we can be at the head of Glasswater before dark, get a few hours sleep, and we will Caspian pretty early tomorrow. What a thing it is to know the coast, said Shrunken. None of us know anything about Glasswater. What about food? Asked Susan. I will have to deal with apples, said Lucy. Do let's get on. We've done nothing yet, and we've been here nearly 2 days. And anyway, no one's going to have my hat for this basket again, said Edmund. He used one of the raincoats as a kind of bag, put a good many apples in it. Then we all had a good long drink at the well, for they would need no more fresh water till they landed at the head of the creek and went down to the boat. The children were sorry to leave Cape Bell, which even the new ones had begun to feel like home again. The DLF had better steer, said Peter, and Ed and I were taking each, half a man ago. We'd better take off our mail. We're going to be pretty warm before we're done. The girls had better be in the bows and shout directions to the DLF because he doesn't know the way. You'd better go a fair way out to sea till we pass the island, and soon the glowing wooded coast of the island was fading away behind them, and its little bays and headlands were beginning to lift flat, and the boat was rising and falling in a gentle swell. The sea began to grow bigger around them, and in the distance, below them, but close round the boat, it was green and bubbly. Everything smelled salt, and there was no noise except the swishing of water and the clop clop of water against the sides and the splash of the rivers and the jolting noise of the rocks. The sun grew hot. It was delightful for Lucy and Susan and the boys running over the edge and trying to get their hands in the sea, which they could never quite reach. The bottom, mostly pure pale sand, with occasional patches of purple seaweed, could be seen beneath them. It's like old times, said Lucy. Do you remember our voyage to Terabithia and Galma and 7 Isles and the Long Islands? Yes, said Susan. And that great ship, the Splendor Hyaline, with the swan's head at her prow, and the carved swan's wings coming back almost to her waist, and the silken sails and the great stone lanterns, and the feast on the poop and the musicians. Do you remember when we had the musicians open the rigging, playing flutes that sounded like music out of the sky? Presently, Susan took over Edmund's arm, and we came forward to join Lucy. They had passed the island now, and still closer into the shore, all wooded and deserted. I thought it would be very pretty if they had not remembered the time when it was perfect and breezy and full of merry friends. Look, this is pretty grueling work, said Peter. Can't I row for a bit, said Lucy. The rooms are too big for you, said Peter shortly. Not because he was cross, but because he had no strength to spare from talking. And that is the end of chapters 7 and 8. Now on to the summaries and reflections for those chapters. So chapters so the summary for chapter 7. This chapter begins at the council of the Dancing Lawn, where there is much disagreement about when/how the council should be held. Eventually, it is decided that a council of war is to be held immediately. Just like the council is beginning, a talking hare alerts everyone that there is a man nearby. The talking beast goes silent, and Dr. Cornelius is discovered nearby. Caspian rejoices and serves his own ally. Unfortunately, Dr. Cornelius alerts them that Caspian's horse, Vestria, unintentionally betrayed Caspian's King Miraz, and the King Miraz and his army were on their way. Dr. Cornelius suggests that they make their way immediately to Aslan's House, a site near the sea where a great hill filled with tunnels has been built up over the standing table. The whole party heads to Aslan's House by sunrise the next morning. King Miraz's army arrives and the two sides have several battles. After one of the worst battles for Caspian's side, the meeting is held with Caspian, Cornelius, Duncan, making Dick a truffle hunter. They decide that it is time for Caspian to blow Queen Susan's horn. Dr. Cornelius feels certain that doing so will bring back either Aslan or the High King Peter. Dr. Cornelius says that if High King Peter is brought back, he will likely arrive at one of three locations. Number one, Peter, at Aslan's house. Number two, at Lantern Waste, where Peter first came to Narnia. Or number three, at Caspian by the sea. It was decided that Patrick the squirrel would go to Lantern Waste and trunk them to live there with Caspian to meet Peter who arrives at one of those locations. Caspian is to blow Queen Susan's horn at sunrise. The incident reflection. It seems that we have finally caught up with Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. One interesting structure to this story. More than the contents of the chapter itself, what is fascinating me about this novel is how it has been written. We start with the pre-chapters, 1 to 3, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. They have been called back into Narnia, but don't know why. Then starting in chapter 4, we flash back to the dwarf story about Punch Caspian, a dwarf we can now vaguely assume is Trunken. In glancing at chapter 8, I can see that we are rejoining Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This means that the time scheme of the novel, the date on which the events actually occur, is as follows. By chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 8, 9, 10, etc. This is an interesting decision that C.S. Lewis decides to make, though certainly not a unique one, but it is a very simple device to help build mystery, suspense, or help the reader begin to compile questions that will then be answered later, aka later, kind of like the flash forwards in the last season of Lost. Responding it in the final two episodes with the big reveal. The device of showing the future first makes us significantly more intrigued about what is happening in the past/present. And likewise, when we do see the past/present, we are then further interested in what the culminating events will be in the future beyond the original future, which thankfully we are on the cusp of discovering in Prince Caspian. In other news, I just discovered this, and it needs to be publicized. The photos are exclamations by a wonderful dwarf, Shrunken. And this is how I already know that Shrunken is our dwarf in chapter 3. These are bedsteads, page 226 from chapter 3. Bulbs and bolsters, make a brick, page 236, chapter 5. Whistles and whirligigs, Truffle Hunter, page 236, also from chapter 5. Soup and celery, from page 244 on chapter 7. Thunders and thunderstorms, page 246, also on chapter 7. I'm sure there have been more along the way, and I'm sure that there are more to come. But I thought that this was a pretty comical way of alerting the reader to Chunkin's presence. His exclamations, always in pairs, and usually alliterative, were definitely a character trait meant to give us a connection between his unnamed presence in the early chapters and who he is in the middle chapters. Thus, the reader knows that we are dealing with only one dwarf, Chunkin, weird device, and rather sneaky. Now, onto the summary for chapter 8. This chapter returns to Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, who have just been told the story of the previous 4 chapters by none other than Chunkin. Chunkin can see that the blowing of the horn has brought these 4 children to Narnia. It is obvious that he does not think that they, children as they are, will be any help to the rear. Peter decides that they should all go to the armory and the Caspian ruins to get the equipment and armor needed for battle. After they all obtain armor and weapons, Edmund challenges Chunkin to a friendly sword duel, and Edmund easily disarms Chunkin. Then Susan challenges him to a bow and arrow match, and Susan easily outshoots Chunkin. Finally, when Chunkin mentions that his arm has a severe wound, Lucy heals him with one drop of her cordial. After this, Chunkin is convinced that Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy are the kings and queens of Narnia, and that they will indeed be helping battle. The good thing is that the best way to get back to Caspian/Aslan's house in the fastest and safest way possible. It was eventually decided that they should go by boat as far as possible, and after gathering provisions, they set off. I'll answer the reflection. This chapter provides the reader a classic example of the importance of never judging a book by its cover. or stated in a non-cliche format, never judge a person by what they appear to be on the outside. In this case, Trumpkin, in a very gracious way, expresses his doubts and concerns about the impact that Peter, Susan, and Lucy might have on the ruler. Then, in as nice a way as possible, Edmund, Susan, and Lucy all demonstrate to Trumpkin that they are worthy. Interestingly, Peter does nothing at all to impress Trumpkin, at least nothing we are told of. This lesson obviously is an important one for young readers to learn. It is definitely a complex one. It was complex because despite the power of being told never to judge a person on how they appear, we humans do this constantly. That doesn't mean it's good, that doesn't mean it's right. But we genuinely do this all the time. We judge people instantly all the time. Think about job interviews and the importance of the first 16 seconds. There are articles out there that will tell you that most employers know whether or not a person is hireable within the first 1 to 2 minutes of an interview. As someone who has sat on both sides of the interview table dozens and dozens of times, I can guarantee that this is true. Indeed, the very phrase is first impressions matter and don't judge a book by its cover are antithetical to one another. You cannot agree with one without disagreeing with the other. There is, of course, a darker side to judging individuals by their appearance that goes well beyond just job interviews because we judge people by their appearance. We hear stories about black men being followed throughout stores or fat people being shamed for their appearance by total strangers. The fact that people judge others based on appearances is the basis for racism, prejudice, and stereotyping. But we can't not do it. Surely we can't not. I'm not saying that humans must be racist. I'm certainly saying that humans must be prejudiced. If you ask a room of 100 people to stand if they have prejudices, and only 50 people stand, there are 50 liars in the room. Everyone has prejudices because in part is an evolutionary part of survival. For instance, it would be wise to have a prejudice against a person wearing a mask and carrying a knife. This would be beneficial to your survival. The problem is that television and media and racism have, for centuries, drawn correlations between people that we should have prejudices against, but i.e., violent people and people that we should have prejudices against, black people. And that's where we get our isms from. Anyway, if you don't think you judge a book by its cover, just rewatch this video and remember the world's reaction to it. Or if you're watching it for the first time, which you aren't, because you don't live under a rock, see if you can make some snap judgments about her as she comes on stage, and see if those judgments are correct. And that is the end of the summary the summaries for both chapter 7 and 8. I clicked on the link for the video. That video does not exist anymore. But you know, you guys know the video, then I don't know. Uh, Maybe you could comment down below what's happening in the video. Uh, so yeah. So I would say if you like anything like reading books, listening to music, talking about wrestling, playing computer games, then hit the subscribe button. Also, if you can leave a like on this video, it'd be very much appreciated. Going to try to record reading chapters 9 and 10 and summaries and chapters for those as well today. Also going to try and release the next listening to the band Red songs I have not heard from Homer Silence. So yeah, I think that's it, and bye.